Holy shit, it's a goddamn dragon. It was a dragon. It was indeed.
Is to go even further beyond!
No. Yo guys, what is up? Mox on Borderlands 4 video, and today we're going to be going over my green tree VEX build. Now, this is a build that is just, it does absurd amounts of damage. It's a ton of fun to play. I put out a leveling guide for VEX for blue tree because I do think blue tree feels better early on for progression because the minions just carry you. However, once you get some gear and some solid weapons, green tree VEX is, in my opinion, the highest damage build in the entire game. Just dishes out crazy boss single target. And so I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. We're going to be going over not only the leveling progression, but also the gear and everything else you need to know about the build. I hope you guys enjoy the breakdown. Let's get right into it. All right, so to start, we're going to be leveling into VEX's green tree with the Incarnate action skill. Basically, this allows you to cause an explosion, which restores your health, gives you movement speed, and allows you to shoot out Eldritch Blasts out of your hand, which deal gun damage and dealing gun damage reduces Eldritch Blast cooldown, so you can like shoot your blast, shoot your gun, and then be able to use your like Eldritch Blast again, and you can press it to end Incarnate early, which will partially refund your cooldown. Now, Incarnate is an action skill that is decent, but the buffs that we can get while Incarnate is active is going to be a whole lot more impactful to this particular build than like actually using the Eldritch Blast. Using the blasts are decent early, but by the time we're endgame, we're really not going to be clicking this button all that often, and I'll explain why later. So for her first points, we're going to be putting points into Leeching Attunement. This is a attunement skill. Attunement, by the way, on VEX is whatever your element of your weapon is holding, you will be attuned to. So if you're holding a kinetic weapon, you don't need to like activate your action skill. You don't need to do anything. If you're holding a kinetic weapon, you will be attuned to that. If you're ever curious, you can like swap to a fire weapon or a blue weapon, and you'll actually see the tattoos like on your leg change colors to the weapon that you're holding. That's how you can kind of tell that you're attuned to it. So this is going to give us lifesteal and reload speed. We're going to be using a lot of Jacob's weapons, which are usually low mag. So while reload speed isn't the most exciting thing, it's actually going to be pretty nice for us. The lifesteal is also great, just because it's going to keep us healthy early on. Then we go points into Bloodletter. Gun and skill critical hits have a chance to apply bleed, causing kinetic status effect damage over time for a duration. Bleed is affected by status effect application chance, and is itself considered a status effect. Now, this is one of VEX's, if not VEX's strongest skill. It is really powerful at dealing single target damage, and there's a few things that's going on with this. So the first is that even though it does kinetic status effect damage over time, you don't need to be using kinetic weapons. You could technically be using shock, fire, whatever. As long as you're critting, you have a chance to proc bleed, and that a chance is affected by status effect application chance. Now, so status effect application chance is like a huge damage increase because by default, when we crit, we only have a 50% chance to proc this. The reason chance is so good is because this stacks up to 20 times. So with a class mod on right now, if I have this fully stacked, I'm dealing 1,200% of my gun damage per second, which is just wild. So if you're stacking this up, you could do some crazy damage. But this works well with snipers. It works well with pistols. As long as you're hitting an enemy, whether you're stacking them up really fast with like a pistol or a shotgun, or just proccing 1 or 2 bleeds with a sniper, this just does a ton of damage. And picking this up is going to be a big power spike. So we're going to grab 5 out of 5 points into Bloodletter. That's going to give us Geist Wave and Energy Vampire. Geist Wave is nice because it allows your Eldritch Blast to do it wider AoE, which is very nice, convenient. However, Energy Vampire is what we're going to be going for. As we kill enemies, we can get stacking status effect damage. Early on, 50% increased status effect damage is wild, and then we put our next points into Material Components, which give us more kinetic damage and more kinetic status effect damage, which is great for us because it's going to be giving us way more bleed damage. And then, you know, at level 15, 17. We've already got 70% status effect damage when we're stacked up with Energy Vampire. Next, we're going to be going into the right side of the tree. Now, there isn't a great point to spend here, mainly because we don't care too much about skill damage. Bleed is not considered a skill in this scenario, and Grave Vitality is just more health and health regen, which we already have some lifesteal. The option here is going to be going Grave Vitality, which is going to give us more survivability. There's not really a better option there. Next, we're going to be putting points into Essence Leech. Now, Bloodshot is a very cool skill. Whenever you use a rep kit, your next gunshot becomes a Bloodshot, which converts damage dealt into kinetic damage, dealing bonus damage based on our current health. This is a ton of damage when you use a rep kit for like a one-shot. However, it's pretty inconvenient to use. There is a legendary class mod that you can make every shot with your sniper rifle a Bloodshot, which I'll have in like a non-leveling build guide. I don't want to make a build that is leveling that requires a legendary class mod to function really. However, I just prefer not using Bloodshot anyways and going with a purple class mod to buff up bleeds kind of regardless. So we're going to put 5 out of 5 points into Essence Leech, which gives us lifesteal, and we double this effect while our action skill is active. So once again, I kind of talked about Incarnate being a really good buff for us. This is one of the first big things, is 10% lifesteal while Incarnate is active. This is on everything. Anything that you're doing is going to be getting lifesteal for you. It's a ton of healing. And then we go Blood is Power, which gives us a bonus kinetic damage as 300% of our lifesteal. So just off of the default with an action skill active, we've got 20% lifesteal here and then 12% lifesteal here. So we've got 32% lifesteal already. Speccing these points down is going to give us Heart Piercer. You don't really need to use Heart Piercer, to be honest. It doesn't really do much for this build. It just gives us more Eldritch Blast damage, basically, which we're not really using. So if you want to use Heart Piercer, you can. You absolutely don't need to. But the big pickup here is now we can get Grave Harvest. This is a kill skill. Killing an enemy while Incarnate is active will spawn a soul orb that deals status effect damage. This is going to give us a little bit of extra AoE, which we've got a lot of single target. It's going to give us more healing, but the big kicker is it's going to give us action skill duration restored by 20% every time that we pick up a soul orb, which is really powerful because we're getting like 100% of bonus kinetic damage while our action skill is active. And to add to that, we're going to go pick up Enhancement. VEX gains bonus kinetic damage with guns while her action skill is active. So now we've got like well over 100% bonus kinetic damage while our action skill is active. And so even though this isn't stacking status effect damage, the ability to keep our action skill active for longer is going to net out way more damage than like using Energy Vampire. Next, we're going to go into Blue Tree. There's some cool options here for like gaining some health, some more reload speed, gun damage, and more max health capacity. We're going to put 3 points into Idle Hands. I know the gun damage here is tempting, but we're going to be using Jacob's weapons. A lot of our DPS is tied to, you know, potentially long reloads on a shotgun or on a pistol. Getting 30% reload speed is huge for 3 points. It'll make the build feel much better. Then we're going to put 2 points into gun damage, just a little bit of extra buff. You could put some more points in health restore on kill, but honestly, we're going to be healing so much, I don't think it's really necessary. And then we get the big thing we're coming over to Blue Tree for, which is Potence of Suffering. That's 35% more status effect damage for us, which is huge. And then that leads us to our next 5 points, which gives us Grave Quickening. This gives us action skill cooldown rate whenever we kill an enemy, which we're going to be killing lots of enemies. But remember, we get huge amounts of damage buffs while our action skill is active, so Grave Quickening is a huge pickup for the build. It's going to lead us to a lot more action skill uptime. For your last point, you could put it anywhere. I think the two best options are 1 point into Prismatic Ichor or Prismatic Weaponry. This gives us bonus damage, or whenever we proc a status effect, we have a chance to apply another one. I've messed around with both. I don't think you really go wrong. We'll probably put that last point into Prismatic. Basically, when we proc a bleed, we can proc a random status effect. If we proc like a shock dot, can help strip some shields, or a fire dot on some health. This is such a small fraction of our damage. In testing Prismatic Ichor, even though 5 out of 5 points here seems like it could be really strong, it just doesn't seem to scale nearly as well with the bleeds. So we're not going to be investing too heavily into it. Now, for gear during the campaign, you're really just using Jacob's weapons. If you can find a Jacob shotgun with spread launcher, the bleed procs from this get absolutely absurd because it does so much damage. Spread launchers are the like highest damage action basically in the game. The other ones are the like knife, the underbarrel that you get on Jacobs, the knife that shoots out, also a ton of damage. But mainly just looking for Jacobs weapons through the campaign. Alt fire like big rockets on the snipers also do a bunch of damage. All these underbarrels can proc bleeds, which is crazy. To give you an idea of how heavy the bleed proc is on this. That is 260 million. 260 million bleed proc on the spread launcher. It is very, very gross. However, like the piece of gear that like really changes this build entirely, that is like your number one priority to make this build pop off, is the penetrator knife. This reads that damage to impacted targets are automatically critical hits for 5 seconds. Now, this is all damage that is done to the target is critting, meaning your action skills, your status effects, everything becomes a critical hit. So now your status effects are critting while you have this knife active, right? And the thing that truly breaks this build is the fact that if we look at bleed procs off of critical hits, right? And so what the shenanigans with how this is doing hundreds of millions of damage is the bleed proc can proc more bleeds. Basically, bleed will, if you proc a knife on an enemy, the bleed will self-stack itself 220 stacks, basically. And it'll keep stacking upon of itself as long as you have the ability to keep critting, basically. Because it'll just keep adding to itself. So, for example, here is this target dummy. I'm going to throw a knife at it and then shoot it. So there's a... See how it's stacking? The bleed's just going up. It's 200. If I throw another knife, now we're doing 1 billion. Throw another knife. All those numbers, those are Bs. So that's like... I mean, that's 900 billion damage. So, yeah, you can very much one-shot every boss in the game. I mean, you could reach trillions and trillions of damage as long as you have enough throwing knives. It'll just keep stacking it of itself. So, yeah, very, very broken interaction. Even if you don't have this knife, though, you could still do ridiculous amounts of damage on this build. But getting a penetrator knife definitely pushes it over the edge. You could technically, like, one-shot a boss with, like, a white weapon, as long as you had enough throwing knives to keep stacking the bleeds on them. For your class mod, you're looking for the Scion class mod. These are the ones that can roll into Bloodletter to give you more bleed damage. Other purple ones that can be pretty solid are the ones called Alchemist. These will also spec into a lot of status effect skills. For example, this isn't like a great Alchemist, but this will spec into, for example, giving me more Potence of Suffering and Keen Suffering, so my stats effects can crit. Those are pretty decent, but the Scion is definitely the best one that you want to be keeping an eye out for. There also is a legendary class mod, if you get lucky enough to find one, that will allow you to proc Bloodshot on just shooting your guns. If you do get that, the really only change with the build is you're going to put 5 points into Bloodshot and just take those 5 points out of this tree. The shield that I'm wearing, I don't want to show the name of the shield because it is potential spoilers, but it is dropped from the final boss of the game. You will know once you get there. But it's basically the Rough Rider from previous games. It gives you no shield capacity, but a bunch of extra health and a bunch of extra healing, which is perfect for us because we have no shield skills. We have all health skills. So just getting way more health is massive for us. For your enhancement, you're looking for just any Jacobs enhancement. Personally, I really like the guns with Jacobs license parts have a 20% chance to grant a critical hit. If you don't have the knife yet, this will lead you to more consistent bleed procs. If you do have the knife, look for the Jacobs license parts, increase the number of possible ricochets by 1. That is also really good. If you can get both on a legendary, that's even better. And some stats you're looking for this are like mainly just gun critical hit damage, gun damage. Anything that increases your gun damage is going to increase your bleed damage, which is great. For legendary weapons, if you do find them, basically any legendary Jacobs will be good. There is a one in the mag Jacob shotgun that I have not found that looks really cool for this build. I mainly rock the 7th Sense. This is an awesome Jacob's pistol that hitting enemies spawns orbs that float upward and home in on targets on reload. It feels really, really good to use. This is going to be dropped from the Below the Surface side quest. The enemies at the end of the Below the Surface side quest in Dominion in the Terminus District. And the other one is the Borstel Ballista. This is also dropped from the same place that the shield is dropped from the final boss of the game. The thing that's so cool about the Borstel Ballista is it's a slow-moving projectile sniper, but it fans out. So it does this big, like, spray. And if you can hit those enemies with the multiple projectiles, then you can proc a lot of bleeds with a sniper, which is just so good. You could hear like all of those shots hitting, and you know, all of a sudden now we're doing 36 million damage off of a single shot. It was a very, very, very good sniper for this build. Now I do want to mention specializations because there's one that is particularly game-changing for this build, and that is contamination. Remember how I talked about how important status effect application chance is for our DPS? Well, this gives our critical hits a chance. Critical hits grant increased status effect application chance, which is 10% per stack for a max stacks of, at max stacks, we're getting 100% status effect application chance. And with our knives, we get guaranteed crits. So this stacks up really fast and will massively increase your bleed DPS. It is just a must-have. I would rush this as fast as possible. And then I also use Riddle You This for more stacking gun damage. One shot, one kill is fantastic with shotguns or snipers to store your extra damage. And then in the zone while aiming, you gain increased gun and crit damage. If you wanted to, you could go down to Survivor to get the best defense. I don't have enough points for this yet. To get 30% damage dealt when your health is full, which our health is basically always full on this build. Guys, that's going to do it for the guide. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you've got any questions and what builds you'd like to see next. I will catch y'all in the next one. Take care. Peace.